Thank you. Um, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about my work on the prison farms in Canada. I do have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. Is that something that people would be interested in, or do people prefer just spoken? Um,
you can use the presentation, like if you think.
Okay, yeah, I'll try the share screen. Here we go. And Soren, maybe if you could just give me, a peace sign when I've got 2 minutes left, and then I'll know to sort of hurry up to wrap up. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to leave it like this instead of making it full screen. So Evolver Prison Farms started in 2016 when the federal government was looking at bringing prison farms back to Canada. So I'm going to bring you through a bit of a whirlwind history of how this started and where it's going. Because it hasn't been a story that has followed the path that a lot of people expected it to. So the former prison farms began in the earliest days of Canada. They started off ultimately as a land grab. The government was able to acquire lands from Indigenous territories by taking the land around prisons in the 1800s and converting it into a farmland, and then it became owned by the state. And then adding animals to the land, they were able to expand the geographic footprint of the farms and acquire more land. And also at the same time, in the government's own words, to transform the Indian into a white man in sentiment by having them learn cattle farming and colonial relationships to land, labor, and animals. So the history of prison farms in Canada is a very problematic one. And there are some academics who have written about the new prison farm program in Canada. It's very important that it not reproduce these colonial relations to land, labor, and animals. We need to take a new approach today with this blank slate that we have. But up until the 21st century, prison farms had evolved to basically produce meat, milk, eggs for prisons, some vegetables as well, completely feeding prisons and food banks. With one exception, during the World Wars, they also fed the armed forces. So that's the history of it. And it also involved at numerous prison farms in Canada, abattoirs on site, prisoners slaughtered and butchered the animals for service into the prisons. Today, there's only one abattoir left in Canada, and that is in Kingston. And I won't say how, but we acquired these photos of the abattoir. It's at Joyceville Institution. So the government bringing prison farms back are going to be beginning in Kingston. There's going to be 2 prison farms in Kingston. They're going to be connected to each other. It's going to be at Joyceville Institution and Collins Bay Institution. Joyceville Institution is where the abattoir continues to operate today. Other abattoirs in Canada closed, and when the Conservatives closed all prison farms in Canada between 2009 and 2011, it was shut down across the board, but this one abattoir was protected because it was so important to the beef and dairy industries, and it serves about 350 local farms in the area. And so farmers initiated a resistance to oppose the closures and to protect the abattoir. They were not successful in preventing the closures, but they were successful in protecting the abattoir. So it continues to operate today using prison labor, being paid only, a few dollars a day to do this work, now exclusively for commercial purposes. It does not feed prisons anymore, because after the prison farms were shut down, the government, the Correctional Service of Canada, privatized the food service contracts. It's now centralized cook chill system, and the quality of food has never been worse. So with these are the closures. It sparked a lot of community resistance. People wanted to protect the farms. This was led by beef and dairy farmers representing the National Farmers Union. They called themselves Save Our Prison Farms. That's where our name comes from. We played on that history with the need now to evolve prison farms, not go back to the old model of meat, milk, and egg production for prisons. But what nobody expected was that prison farms can no longer feed prisons at all because of the private food contracts. And so it took a lot of people by surprise. So the new prison farm model is a commercial model for the private sector. And what other people also did not expect is that we are not going to be seeing the cow dairy operations coming back in particular. It's going to be an industrial goat dairy operation. So the old farms had up to, in Kingston, about 300 cows at the maximum. All the cows had names. A few inmates were assigned to work with 8, 9, 10 cows. It was their string of cows. They knew them. There were problems still with involving the insemination and the slaughter of animals and other aspects of dairy and meat production that make it really kind of inappropriate in the context of prisoner rehabilitation. But prisoners talk about how working with the animals was very therapeutic and meaningful for them. And we can't dismiss the fact that it was a very transformative experience for many people who worked on those farms. But this new model has changed the game completely. It's commercial, it's for the private sector, it's industrial. And the reason the Correctional Service of Canada went with industrial goat dairy was reportedly because of the new Chinese infant formula processing facility that's been built in Kingston, right between the two prison farms. And they're going to be needing milk from 150,000 goats from across Canada and the US. And there currently is not enough of a supply. The federal government and provincial governments have invested tens of millions of dollars into the infant formula facility, which is going to export its product to China. So without going too much into the details, anybody can see that there's a major problem here, and the feel-good community story of prison farms are coming back has changed. And we've had to work very hard to dig out the evidence and put it out in the public domain so that we can change the narrative. This is not a good story of community resistance resulting in the government making a decision to do something good. They have just taken that old story and used it to introduce an even greater injustice than the prison farm closures were a decade ago. So what have we done? Evolve our prison farms. We started out just proposing if you're going to be having prison farms, it should be plant-based, healthy foods that are good for our bodies, good for the environment, and doesn't have these conflicted relationships with animals. But if you want to have animals and absolutely must have the cows back, which is what people in the Kingston community cared about, was just seeing the cows go back, we said you can look at an animal-assisted therapy model rather than dairy. And of course, lactose intolerance and serving dairy into the prisons with the processing costs, there were all kinds of problems. But those arguments didn't really matter in the end because of the prison farms not feeding prisoners. So over the years, we've held many protests in front of the prisons, highlighting the importance of prisoner justice, animal justice, environmental justice. We have, this is one from Prisoner Justice Day. Because this journey has also brought us into the world of prisons and recognizing the serious human rights transgressions that happen every day in the prisons. So this isn't just a one-sided approach that we've been taking about just the animals. This is very much a human rights issue and very much an environmental issue. As Salish has pointed out, we need to change, and our federal government should not be investing now into a program, a federal program of industrial animal agriculture, exploiting prison labor for the private sector and in export to international markets. It checks all the wrong boxes instead of checking all the right boxes. So we have, and you'll see here in this picture, keep kids out of prison has been one of our slogans. And the man front and center there is my dear friend, Sean Shannon, who was a former prison farm worker who credits working with the cows as having saved his life. He says if it hadn't been for those farms, he'd be still in prison or he'd be dead now. And I love this man dearly. And he's very pro-dairy, pro-meat and potatoes, but he is 100% behind Evolve Our Prison Farms because he recognizes what's being done here and how he has been used to justify this new thing being brought in today. So our campaign has managed to bring together people from all walks of life, which is so crucial. We need to be speaking for and defending people from all different walks of life and building relationships and relationships of trust. A message can't get through where there isn't trust established. So that's been a very important piece of our strategy. Not that it's been an intentional strategy, just a natural thing that emerges from caring very deeply about this. And so our message has to be as palatable to vegans as to omnivores, and to prisoners as to academics and politicians. And we have to speak the language of all in a very universal way in order to make this change. And so we also do activism, we do work with academics and bringing in experts as well. And we really had to highlight, because people did not believe, and the media was not covering the story of what was happening and the connection to this Chinese infant formula factory, which itself has its own environmental footprint and its own problems associated with it. But our campaign has an absolute laser focus on the prison farms. And that's been one of the most effective parts of the strategy. We're not tackling the enormous issues of things that we just can't change, animal agriculture in the big picture. There are other people working on that. By having the single narrow focus of the prison farms. And this is something that we can change, we can achieve as a federal program of rehabilitation that should recognize human rights, that should recognize the climate crisis, and that should use taxpayer dollars responsibly and have an effective program, something that is relevant to the rehabilitative process. So basically another slogan that we've had is rehabilitation, not exploitation. So we've held one protest here to draw attention, and that did get us some media coverage that has been hard for us to get because of the dominant narrative of, yay, prison farms are coming back. But the most effective step that we took was in January of this year, which was the publication of an academic report. This was written by two academics, Dr. Amy Fitzgerald, Dr. Amanda Wilson. One is a criminologist, the other is an expert in social innovation in carceral food systems and transforming food systems. They made a perfect pairing to expose why this prison farm model is not going to work and does not meet the stated goals of the program, and then proposing alternatives based on the best evidence. And of course, those alternatives are plant-based and innovative and relevant and proven in models that we've seen elsewhere. So there's three parts to the problem. One, prison labor and the violation of human rights, which under the United Nations International Labor Organization standards for the use of prison labor, it may not be associated with the private sector unless it has equal wages to free workers, working conditions equal to free workers, and voluntariness and freedom from coercion and fear of penalty. And none of those conditions exist in Canada. So this new prison farm model is a violation of human rights. Of course, the animal welfare, even people who are pro-dairy don't like industrial farming. They don't want this. And so really the Correctional Service of Canada has done us, in a sense, a great favor by coming up with the worst possible model that they could have come up with that leaves a sour taste in everybody's mouth. So the welfare of animals. And then of course, we've also had to work very hard to highlight the abattoir, which has been kept out of sight and out of mind. And last year to track, we were hearing reports from prisoners about calves dying. They had started buying beef cattle, bull calves, because they were having trouble getting the goats. So they just started to buy up some animals to put in the fields. And there were 15 deaths of bull calves in 2020 that the Correctional Service of Canada is not explaining. I have absolutely no suspicion whatsoever that prisoners were responsible. I believe it was mismanagement and procurement of animals in the winter from auctions in a rush, and then the lockdowns and the standard of care. So I don't want to paint the picture that, prisoners would necessarily harm animals, although that is a risk and prisoners will say so themselves. But this whole prison farm program has been mismanaged start to finish. And then the third problem, of course, being the environmental toll. And an operation like this, of this scale, it's going to be 2,200 goats in a fully indoor facility. It's a factory farming conditions, building a manure lagoon, 120 feet in diameter, 14 feet in depth. And the impact on the environment and the waterways and the wells and the neighboring, the air, odor, and noise pollution, decreased property values. This is bad news. And so that has started to, with the exposure from our report, it has started to get attention and media attention. That has been very hard to come by over the years. But the narrative has changed now. We have succeeded in doing that, and that has been absolutely essential. And then in addition to tearing apart the problems of the current model, we have proposed solutions in transitioning to the plant-based. And the wonderful news now, most recently, is that the Correctional Service of Canada has just announced a temporary pause on the industrial goat farm plans. It was scheduled for construction. Well, they tried to get it started in 2018. Then they tried to get it started in 2019, and they had problem after problem getting their goats. And I know this because I filed 63 access to information requests over the past 2.5 years. So I've been following this, every bit of it. The research and investigation has been absolutely crucial to expose what's happening, to understand what's happening. And so now we've got, just following 2 months after the release of our report, CSE announces the pause. They are feeling the pressure. Politicians are paying attention and asking very serious questions about what's happening. We have had 9 petitions over the years, and our most recent one is doing very well. It's over 30,000 signatures at the moment on change.org, Stop the Prison Industrial Goat Farm. And in the meantime, understanding this issue, because it's so focused, that's been a real advantage, because I know every player, and I'll show you here who the players are from left to right. Anne Kelly, the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, she is at the top of the Correctional Service. There is the Minister of Public Safety, Bill Blair, who replaced Minister Goodale, Ralph Goodale. And so the entire prison system falls under his portfolio. So ultimately, it does come down to him. If he changes his mind on this, then the program will change. Then there's the CEO of Corcan, Kelly Hartle. Corcan is the business branch of the Correctional Service of Canada. So they run all of the prison businesses, which have never before been used for the private sector. So this is setting a new precedent for prison labor in Canada. And then, of course, Justin Trudeau. If he flips a switch on this, done deal. So we've been putting pressure on the decision makers, and just in response to the temporary pause on the goat plan, CSC is saying they're going to expand some cow dairy operations. They had started acquiring some dairy cows under public pressure from local farmers who wanted the cows included. And these farmers are on the Prison Farm Advisory Panel. So they're appointed to the advisory panel, lobbied to sell their cows, invoiced personally despite conflict of interest agreements that they signed. So there's many, many problems with how this entire thing has played out. And they're still lobbying to sell more of their cows. And in order to accommodate that, the Correctional Service of Canada had to acquire research quota for the cow milk, because the milk can't be served into prisons because of the private contracts, and cow dairy is supply managed in Canada, so it cannot be sold on the market. So they come up with this research quota category in order to do it. And so CSE right now is saying they're going to build a cow milking barn while awaiting the end of the pandemic to start the goat operation. I have a very strong sense that the goats will never come at this point. Our report exposes CSC to legal liabilities if they proceed, now that they are publicly and fully aware of the implications. So now they're trying to put the focus on the cows, some cow dairy, and we need to stop that because it's absolutely pointless. It has all the problems of animal agriculture and absolutely no relevance. It's not even to feed prisoners anymore. So we're going to have the environmental impact. We're going to have all the problematic aspects of animal agriculture for no point whatsoever. And CSC has already exceeded its budget. It was supposed to be within the budget of 4.3 million. They've already spent nearly $7 million with very little to show for it. So this is a major political embarrassment. And we just need to keep the pressure points on. So what people can do to help, they already have some barns, they already have cows, but they haven't built the milking facilities. So our strategy right now in this temporary pause gap is to push for an immediate transition to plant-based agriculture and take the cows and barns that they have, not milking barns, and establish that as the animal-assisted therapy. No more procurement, no more purchases of animals, no building of milking facilities or processing equipment. Stop spending the money, convert it right now with what you have. We no longer advocate animal-assisted therapy openly because of the mismanagement that we have witnessed. But rather than this is a solution. We have told the government we will not oppose it if they now transition to animal-assisted therapy with the existing animals that they own. And if that fails, then we will move to see a shutdown of the entire program, which I think is entirely possible, will happen at this point anyways. And either solution is acceptable to us as long as there is no open exploitation of prisoners or animals. So how can people help? Our current petition on change.org, Stop the Prison Industrial Goat Farm. You can visit our Take Action page on our website, evolveourprisonfarms.ca, and you can see the decision makers that you can send a letter to keep up the pressure right now. If you have contacts in media, help put us in touch, because this is a hot topic. It's happening right now. And also follow us, please follow us on social media. I know a few of you, I recognize some of your names there who have participated in our postcard campaign. We sent 23,000 of these to the Minister of Public Safety in 2019. Thank you very much. We've heard from prisoners. I've got just here just a sampling of some of the letters that we get from prisoners who are very grateful that we're following this, because they know what CSC is like and how it, the nickname in prisons for CSC is common sense canceled. And that's what we've seen manifest with these prison farms. If you have any connections in politics, please do help us. We have politicians from the Green Party, the Liberals, to a very small extent, because this is a liberal action and a liberal policy that's being enacted. The Conservatives are on board with us, the Greens, the NDP. So if you have any connections there. And then we're going to be developing in the very immediate future, a sign-on statement. And this is where we're going to want all different agencies and organizations and prominent individuals in Canada to sign on to a statement about the need to immediately transition the prison farm program in this opportunity, that this temporary pause on the prison industrial goat farm, the major livestock enterprise, represents. So I'd love to get, climate healers and plant-based transition coalition and all the different groups to sign on, in addition to other industry groups such as Ontario Goat is the goat dairy industry in Ontario, and they are not at all happy with entering into competition with the federally funded agribusiness, using prison labor being paid under $1 an hour. So we can get animal industry representatives, along with animal rights and climate action, and people who are for sustainable dairy, even, who don't want to see this. And we know that if we stop the goat farm, that is going to either spell an end for the prison farm entirely, or the transition of it to plant-based, because we know they can't do dairy for prisons. So those cows are not a moneymaker, is not going to make any money for it. They were just added on as a peripheral, as a public relations move to cover up the problems associated with this goat operation, which is the major livestock enterprise. So by stopping the goats, we stop the prison dairy, even if they say that they're going to be expanding the cow dairy. I don't see how they're going to make that last. I understand the situation well enough to know that they're, up Milk Creek without a paddle on this one. So I would love to gain support and any ideas. If you have anyone that you can connect us with, I appreciate that. I'm always eager to talk to everybody and anybody and hear your ideas. And please stay tuned for when we release the sign-on statement. And we're going to try to drive that as a final last chance for the government to change this, to transition it, or else to see the entire thing shut down. Thank you.